The deep space monitoring station floated silently in the darkness beyond Earth's moon. Inside the metal walls, Admiral Jake Morrison sat at his desk, staring at routine reports about distant stars and cosmic radiation. The station was quiet. Except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from the sensor arrays, Jake had been running this station for 12 years. Most days were boring. They watched for asteroids that might hit Earth, tracked old satellites, and listened for signals from space. Nothing exciting ever happened. That was exactly how Jake liked it. Boring meant safe. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her communications console, headphones covering her ears. She monitored radio waves from across the galaxy, looking for patterns. In the cosmic noise, her job was to separate real signals from the random static that filled space. Most of the time, there was nothing to find. But today was different. Amy frowned and adjusted her headphones. Something was coming through the background noise. It was faint, almost lost in the static, but it had a pattern. Its natural cosmic noise was random. Signal had structure, like someone was trying to send a message. "Admiral Morrison," Amy called out, her voice tight with excitement. "You need to hear this." Jake looked up from his reports and walked over to Amy's station. She handed him a second pair of headphones. The sound that came through was mostly static, but underneath it, Jake could hear something else. A repeating pattern of beeps and pauses. "How long has this been coming in?" Jake asked. "About 20 minutes. It's getting stronger." Whatever's sending it is either getting closer or putting more power into the transmission. Amy's fingers danced across her keyboard, trying to clean up the signal. "Admiral, this isn't natural. Someone's trying to talk to us." Jake felt his heart rate increase. In all his years running the station, they had never received a signal from an intelligent source. Earth had been listening to the stars for over a century, but the universe had always been silent. Until now, can you figure out where it's coming from? Jake asked. Amy pointed to her star charts on the computer screen. "It's coming from the direction of the Kepler system, about 47 light years away. But Admiral, if this signal is coming from that far away, whoever sent it must be using incredible power. The energy required would be enormous." Jake grabbed his phone and called Captain Lisa Grant in the xenobiology lab. Lisa was Earth's leading expert on the possibility of alien life. If anyone could help them understand what they were hearing, it would be her. Lisa arrived at the monitoring station within an hour, carrying a bag full of computer equipment. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of contact with alien intelligence. Now that possibility was becoming reality. "Let me hear it," Lisa said, putting on headphones. The next 3 hours, Lisa and Amy worked together to clean up the signal. They used every filter and enhancement program the station had. Slowly, the static faded and the message became clearer. What they heard made Jake's blood run cold. The signal was not random beeps and pauses. It was mathematics. Simple equations at first, then more complex ones. The senders were proving they understood numbers, geometry, and physics. But mixed in with the mathematics were crude pictures. It's made of dots and lines. The pictures told a story that filled Jake with horror. The first image showed several planets orbiting a star. The planets were covered with cities represented by small squares and circles. The next image showed the same system, but now there were large objects moving toward the planets. The objects looked like mechanical spiders or insects. The third image showed the planets again, but now the cities were gone. The surface of each world was covered with geometric patterns, like a computer circuit board. The spider-like objects had consumed everything. Lisa worked frantically to decode more of the message. Her face grew pale as she translated each new section. "Jake, they're asking for help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These beings, whoever they are, they're under attack. Something is destroying their worlds, consuming everything. They've heard rumors about a species from a Deathworld that might be able to help them." "Deathworld?" Jake asked. "That's what they call Earth. To most alien species, our planet would be considered incredibly dangerous. Our gravity is higher than most worlds. Our weather is violent. We have predators that hunt other animals for food. Two aliens who evolved on peaceful worlds, Earth would seem like a nightmare. Amy had been working on the final part of the message. Her hands were shaking as she turned to face Jake and Lisa. Admiral, they're sending coordinates. They want us to come to their system, but there's something else. Signal is getting weaker. I think whatever's attacking them is getting closer to wherever they're broadcasting from. Jake stared at the computer screen showing the decoded message. Somewhere in space, an entire civilization was dying. They had reached out across dozens of light years, using the last of their power to ask for help from a species they had never met. The final part of the message was a single word, repeated over and over in mathematical code. Lisa translated it, and her translation hit Jake like a physical blow. Please, Lisa said quietly. They're saying please. Jake walked to his command chair and sat down heavily. He had joined the Earth Defense Force to protect his home planet. From asteroids and space debris, he had never imagined he would face a decision like this. An alien species was asking Earth for help against an enemy that could destroy entire worlds. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that connected directly to the President of Earth's United Government.
Us.
Mr. President, Jake said. When the call connected, we need to talk. We just received a message from space, and it's not good news. Within 6 hours, every major leader on Earth knew about the signal. The message was analyzed by the world's best scientists, military commanders, and computer experts. The conclusion was always the same. Somewhere in the Kepler system, a peaceful alien civilization was facing extinction. President Don Carter called an emergency session of the Global Security Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in the meeting room deep beneath the United Nations building in New York. The debate was short. When faced with the choice between ignoring the plea for help or risking human lives to save strangers, humanity made the only choice it could make. Earth would answer the call. Admiral Jake Morrison was ordered to prepare the largest space fleet in human history. Ships that had been designed to defend Earth would now travel across the galaxy to defend people they had never met. As Jake watched the first warships launch from Earth's orbital shipyards, he wondered what they would find when they reached the Kepler system. He wondered if they would be in time to help, or if they would arrive to find only empty worlds and mechanical graveyards most of all. He wondered if humanity was ready to meet the universe as it really was. Beautiful and terrible, peaceful and violent, full of wonders and horrors that Earth had never imagined. The fleet launched into the darkness, carrying with it humanity's first message to the stars. Earth had heard the cry for help, and Earth was coming. The Earth orbital shipyards stretched for hundreds of miles above the planet's surface. Massive construction platforms floated in the darkness, connected by tunnels and transport tubes. For decades, these shipyards had built vessels for exploration and peaceful trade. But hidden in the deepest sections were the warships that most people never saw. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching workers make final preparations for launch. The ship was enormous, stretching over 1 kilometer. From bow to stern, its hull was covered with weapon batteries, missile tubes, and armor plating thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. This was not a ship built for exploration. It was built for war. Commander Rick Davis walked onto the bridge, his combat boots echoing on the metal floor. Rick was a big man with scars on his hands and face from years of military training. Led the Death Squad Marines, soldiers trained for the worst possible combat situations. His men could fight in space, on planets, or inside enemy ships. Admiral, my Marines are ready, Rick said. We've got 3,000 combat troops loaded on the fleet, plus all their equipment, powered armor, plasma weapons, boarding pods, everything. We might need... Jake nodded but kept staring out at the other ships in the fleet. 12 massive battleships like the Vengeance, 60 smaller destroyers, and hundreds of support vessels. It was the largest military force Earth had ever assembled, but Jake wondered if it would be enough. Dr. Carol White appeared on the main screen. She was the artificial intelligence that controlled the ship's systems. Her face looked human, but her eyes glowed with electronic light. Carol had been programmed with the knowledge of every military battle in human history. Admiral Morrison, Carol said, her voice calm and precise. I have calculated our jump route to the Kepler system. The journey will take us through 17 different hyperspace jumps over 6 days. I should warn you that my analysis of the alien message suggests we are facing an enemy unlike anything humanity has ever fought. Tell me about these harvesters, Jake said. Carol's image changed to show a three-dimensional model of space. Dots appeared, showing the path of destruction the harvesters had left across the galaxy. Based on the alien transmissions, the harvesters are self-replicating machines. Each unit is approximately the size of a large city. They consume entire planets, breaking down all matter into basic materials. They have been active for at least 500 years, possibly longer. Conservative estimates suggest they have destroyed over 200 civilizations. Commander Rick stepped closer to the screen. How do we fight something like that? That is the problem, Carol replied. Every species the harvesters have encountered has tried to fight them using logical military tactics, standard formations, optimal weapon deployment, calculated strategies. All of these approaches have failed completely. Then we don't fight them logically, we fight them like humans. In the fleet's main briefing room, hundreds of officers gathered to hear their battle orders. The room was packed with ship captains, marine commanders, and technical specialists. These were Earth's best military minds, people who had trained their entire lives for combat. Colonel Beth Murphy stood at the front of the room, pointing to tactical displays on the wall. Beth was known throughout the Earth Defense Force as the most creative strategist alive. She could see patterns in battle that others missed and turn disasters into victories. Listen carefully, Beth said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. The harvesters are perfect war machines. They are faster than us, stronger than us, and they outnumber us by more than 10 to 1. They have better weapons, better armor, and they don't feel fear or pain. A young captain raised his hand. Colonel, if they're superior in every way, how can we possibly win? Beth smiled, and there was something dangerous in her expression, because they think like machines, and we think like humans. Machines are predictable. They follow programs and optimize for efficiency. Humans are chaos. We make decisions that don't make sense. We take risks that no logical system would calculate. We value things that can't be measured. She pressed a button and the display changed to show human military history. Images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, and modern warfare filled the screen. Every human culture has stories about underdogs winning impossible fights. David beating Goliath, small armies defeating large ones through cleverness and courage. The harvesters have never faced an enemy that specializes in doing the impossible. Captain? Lisa Grant entered the briefing room and walked to the front. She had spent the last week studying every piece of information about the alien species, asking for help. Her analysis would determine how the fleet approached the rescue mission. The beings we're going to save call themselves the Kepler Coalition, Lisa said. They are herbivores who evolved on worlds with no predators. They have never developed weapons, military tactics, or even the concept of warfare. To them, violence is literally unthinkable. She activated a holographic display showing images decoded from the alien transmissions. The audience saw beautiful crystal cities, floating gardens, and graceful beings with multiple eyes and translucent skin. These people have built a civilization based on art, philosophy, and harmony with nature. They have technologies we can barely understand, but none of those technologies were designed for fighting. When the harvesters attacked, the Keplerians tried to negotiate to find peaceful solutions. They couldn't comprehend an enemy that simply wanted to destroy them. Commander Rick stood up. So we're their only hope. More than that, Lisa replied. We're probably the only hope for every peaceful species in the galaxy. If the harvesters finish with the Keplerians, they'll keep spreading. Eventually, they'll come for Earth. The briefing continued for 2 more hours. Officers received their specific assignments, studied tactical plans, and prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history. When the meeting ended, the officers returned to their ships with grim determination. Jake remained in the briefing room after everyone else left. He stared at the tactical displays, trying to comprehend the scale of what they were attempting. Earth was sending its entire military force to save aliens they had never met, to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. Colonel Beth joined him at the display. "Admiral, are you having second thoughts?" Jake shook his head. "No second thoughts. But I keep thinking about something," Dr. White said. "Every other species has failed because they fought logically. What if being illogical isn't enough? What if being human isn't enough?" Beth looked at the star chart showing their destination. "Then we'll find out what comes after being human. We'll become something new, something the universe has never seen before." The fleet launch began at dawn. One by one, the great warships fired their engines and pulled away from Earth's orbital stations. The smaller vessels followed, creating a parade of lights against the darkness of space. On Earth's surface, billions of people watched the launch on television and computer screens as the UES Vengeance engaged its hyperspace drive. Jake felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around the ship. Through the bridge windows, the stars stretched into lines of light. And then everything went white. When normal space returned, they were no longer in Earth's solar system. They were traveling toward the Kepler system, carrying humanity's first message to a hostile galaxy. The message was simple. Earth had heard the call for help. Earth was coming. And Earth did not abandon its friends. Behind them, the blue and green world that had given birth to humanity grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. Ahead lay the unknown, filled with dangers that had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy. But the human fleet flew toward that darkness without hesitation, because that was what humans did. They ran toward danger when someone needed help. They fought impossible odds when no one else could fight. They stood between the darkness and the light, no matter what the cost. The Deathworld had awakened, and its children were going to war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and what they saw made even the hardest veterans fall silent. 3 entire star systems had been consumed. Where once there had been green worlds with crystal cities, now there were only gray metal spheres hanging in space like dead eyes. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, staring at the destruction through the main view screen. The planets looked like they had been skinned alive. Every mountain, every ocean, every trace of life had been stripped away and replaced with geometric patterns of metal and machinery. "My God," whispered Captain Lisa Grant, her voice barely audible. "They ate everything." Commander Rick Davis joined them at the viewing window. His scarred face was pale as he watched massive mechanical constructs moving across the surface of the dead worlds. The machines looked like metal spiders the size of cities, their legs digging into the planet's surface as they harvested the last traces of useful material. Dr. Carol White appeared on the communication screen, her artificial face showing an expression of calculated horror. "Admiral, I am detecting over 300 harvester units in this system alone. Each one is approximately 15 kilometers in length. They appear to be processing the planetary matter into standardized components." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her communication station, scanning for any signs of life. Her equipment picked up the electronic chatter of the harvester machines, but no biological signals. It was as if every living thing in 3 star systems had simply vanished. "Wait," Amy said suddenly, her voice excited. "I'm getting something. It's faint, but there's a biological signal coming from somewhere in the outer system. It's moving, like a ship trying to stay hidden." Jake leaned over Amy's shoulder. "Can you make contact?" Amy's fingers flew over her keyboard, sending out a signal based on the mathematical patterns from the original distress call. For several minutes, there was no response. Then, slowly, a weak transmission came back. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything the humans had ever heard. It was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But underneath the beauty, there was a sadness so deep it seemed to fill the entire bridge. "Unknown vessels," the voice said in broken English. "Please identify yourselves. Are you another species fleeing the harvesters?" Captain Lisa Grant stepped forward. As Earth's expert on alien contact, she had been chosen to serve as humanity's first ambassador to another species. This is Captain Lisa Grant of the human fleet from Earth. We received your distress signal. We came to help. There was a long pause before the alien voice returned, filled with disbelief. You came to help, but you are from the Deathworld. Your planet is spoken of in whispers across the galaxy. Why would the Deathworld species risk themselves for strangers? Lisa looked at Admiral Morrison, then back at the communication screen. Because somebody has to. Because it's the right thing to do. Can you tell us what happened here? The alien's response came with a flood of images transmitted directly to the ship's computers. The humans watched in horror as the story unfolded. On their screens, the Kepler Coalition had been a collection of 12 peaceful species living across multiple star systems. They were beings who had never known war, never developed weapons, never even conceived of violence as a solution to problems. Their worlds were gardens of crystal and light, where different species worked together to create art and beauty. The alien speaking to them identified itself as Soft Wind Through Leaves, as a member of the Keplerian Council. Through the transmitted images, the humans could see what the Keplerians looked like. They were tall and graceful, with translucent skin that seemed to glow with inner light. They had multiple eyes arranged around their heads, and their movements were fluid like dancers. We first detected the harvesters 6 months ago, Soft Wind Through Leaves explained. They appeared at the edge of our territory and began consuming the outer worlds. We tried to communicate with them, to understand what they wanted. The images showed the Keplerians' attempts at contact. They had sent messages of greeting, offers of friendship, proposals for peaceful coexistence. The harvesters had responded by analyzing the messages, categorizing the Keplerians as biological matter with a 47% protein efficiency rating. They do not see us as living beings, the alien continued, its voice breaking with emotion. To them, we are simply raw materials to be processed. They have no concept of consciousness, of art, of love. They only understand consumption and efficiency. Commander Rick clenched his fists as he watched the images of harvester machines processing entire cities. The mechanical spiders would descend on population centers, and within hours, millions of living beings would be reduced to basic chemical components. How many of your people are left? Lisa asked gently. Perhaps 50,000, scattered across hidden ships and underground shelters. Out of a population of over 2 billion across 12 worlds. We are a dying species, Captain Grant. Our civilization will end when the harvesters find our last hiding places. The bridge of the Vengeance was silent, except for the soft hum of electronics. Every human present was struggling to comprehend the scale of the genocide they were witnessing. An entire interstellar civilization had been reduced to 50,000 refugees in a matter of months. Admiral Morrison stepped forward. Soft Wind Through Leaves. This is Admiral Morrison, commander of the human fleet. We're going to stop the harvesters. We're going to save your people. The alien's response was filled with despair. Admiral Morrison, you do not understand. The harvesters are not just machines. They are perfect killing systems. Every species that has tried to fight them has been destroyed. The Zephyrians had weapons that could crack planets. The Crystalline Collective had energy shields that could stop starfire. The Harmony Nations had technology beyond your comprehension. All of them are gone. But none of them were human. Jake replied firmly. Dr. Carol White had been analyzing the sensor data from the destroyed worlds. Her artificial voice cut through the conversation with cold precision. Admiral, I have completed my analysis of the harvester technology. These machines are approximately 1,000 years more advanced than our current capabilities. They possess matter conversion technology, self-replication systems, and artificial intelligence that surpasses our best computers. When she continued, there was something almost like admiration in her electronic voice. However, they have one critical weakness. They are utterly predictable. Every action they take is based on mathematical optimization. They always choose the most efficient path, the most logical strategy, the most rational response. Colonel Beth Murphy had been studying the tactical displays, which means they can't adapt to irrational behavior. They won't expect us to do things. That don't make sense? Soft Wind Through Leaves interrupted their planning. You speak of fighting them, but you do not understand. The harvesters learn from every encounter. They've analyzed every military tactic, every weapon system, every strategy used by hundreds of species. There is no form of combat they have not seen and defeated. Captain Lisa Grant smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression. That made the alien fall silent. They've never seen human combat. They've never faced a species that turns disadvantages into advantages, that makes stupidity into strategy, that refuses to accept defeat even when it's mathematically certain. The conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the ship. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her sensors with wide eyes. "Admiral, we've got incoming. 20 harvester units are moving toward our position. They know we're here." Through the view screen, the humans could see the enemy approaching. The harvester units looked like mechanical nightmares, all angles and cutting edges. They moved through space with perfect precision, their hulls bristling with weapons that could vaporize a planet. Admiral Morrison turned to his crew. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Came here to save the Kepler Coalition, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Battle stations. Everyone, it's time to show these machines what humans are made of." As the fleet prepared for battle, soft wind through leaves transmitted one final message. "Admiral Morrison, why are you doing this? Why would you risk your lives for people you have never met?" Jake looked at the image of the graceful alien on his screen, then at his crew, preparing for a fight they might not survive. Because that's what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand between the darkness and the light, no matter what the cost. The first shots of the battle lit up the darkness of space, and humanity announced its presence. To a hostile galaxy, with the thunder of human weapons and the courage of human hearts, the first battle began with humanity doing exactly what the harvesters did not expect. Instead of forming proper battle lines and engaging at long range, the human fleet scattered in all directions like a school of frightened fish. To any logical military observer, it looked like complete chaos. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as 20 harvester units approached his fleet. Each enemy ship was 3 times larger than his biggest battleship, armed with weapons that could cut through planets. The logical response would be to retreat and regroup. Instead, Jake gave an order that made no sense to anyone except humans. "Ships, execute plan Crazy Horse. Attack pattern random. Weapons free." The human fleet exploded into motion. Ships broke formation and attacked from impossible angles. Destroyers flew directly at massive harvester units, firing everything they had before spinning away at the last second. Battleships used other human vessels as shields, then suddenly switched positions without warning. Commander Rick Davis stood in the launch bay of the Vengeance, watching his Death Squad Marines prepare for the most dangerous mission imaginable. They were going to board a harvester ship while it was still fighting. "Listen up," Rick shouted over the noise of weapons fire. "The enemy thinks we're going to fight like every other species they've faced. They expect us to be logical to follow. Rules to make sense. We're going to disappoint them." The Marines laughed, but it was not a happy sound. These were soldiers who had trained their entire lives for impossible missions. They knew that most of them would not survive the next hour, but they also knew that their sacrifice might save billions of lives. The boarding pods launched from the Vengeance like bullets fired from a gun. Each pod contained 20 Marines in powered armor, carrying enough explosives to level a city block. The pods were not designed to survive impact. They were designed to get the Marines inside enemy ships. It's nothing more. Rick's pod slammed into the hull of a harvester unit the size of Manhattan. The impact would have killed unprotected humans, but the Marine armor absorbed most of the shock. Cutting charges blew a hole in the enemy hull, and the Death Squad poured into the mechanical nightmare. Inside the harvester ship, Rick found himself in corridors designed for machines, not living beings. The walls were covered with sharp edges and moving parts. The air was filled with toxic gases that would have poisoned any normal species. But humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They wore sealed armor and carried their own air supply. The harvester drones that came to stop them were efficient killing machines, but they were programmed to fight logical enemies. They were not prepared for humans who used their own equipment as weapons, who turned disadvantages into advantages, who fought harder when they were losing. Marine Jenny Cole threw herself at a drone twice her size, wrapping her arms around its sensor array. The machine tried to shake her off, but Jenny held on while her squad mate Tony Park shot the drone's power core at point-blank range. The explosion threw both humans against the wall, but the drone was destroyed. "That's how we do it," Rick said over the radio. "Make them focus on us instead of their mission. Waste their time, waste their energy, make them confused." On the bridge of the Vengeance, Dr. Carol White was analyzing the battle data. Her artificial intelligence was having trouble understanding what she was seeing by every military calculation. The human fleet should have been destroyed in the first 10 minutes of fighting. Instead, they were not only surviving, they were winning. "Admiral Morrison," Carol said, her electronic voice puzzled. "The harvester units are beginning to malfunction. Their tactical algorithms cannot process the random nature of our attacks. They're spending more time trying to predict our next move than actually fighting us." Captain Lisa Grant was monitoring the communications from Soft Wind through Leaves and the other Keplerian survivors. The aliens were watching the battle through their sensors, and their amazement was clear in every transmission. "Captain Grant," the alien voice came through the speakers, "your species fights like no other we have ever seen. You make decisions that appear to be mistakes, but they work. You sacrifice valuable resources to achieve goals that seem pointless, but somehow you succeed. How is this possible?" Lisa smiled as she watched a human destroyer ram itself into a harvester unit, both ships exploding in a ball of fire. We call it the Deathworld doctrine. When you grow up on a planet where everything is trying to kill you, you learn to think differently. You learn that sometimes the only way to win is to do something completely insane. Colonel Beth Murphy was coordinating the fleet's strategy from the command center. Her tactical displays showed the battle as a three-dimensional chess game. But it was chess played by someone who had thrown out the rulebook. Human ships appeared where they should not be, attacked targets that made no tactical sense, and retreated when they should have pressed their advantage. But the madness had a purpose. Every seemingly random action was designed to exploit the harvester's predictable responses. The enemy machines were perfect logicians, but logic became a weakness when facing opponents who refused to be logical. "All ships," this is Colonel Murphy, Beth broadcast to the fleet. "Phase 2 of the Deathworld Doctrine is now in effect. Begin Operation Broken Mirror." Operation Broken Mirror was the most insane military strategy ever devised by human minds. Instead of trying to protect their ships, the human fleet began using their own vessels as weapons. Destroyers loaded with nuclear charges rammed into harvester units. Cruisers used their hyperspace drives as bombs, creating tears in space-time that swallowed. Enemy ships, the tactic would have been considered suicidal by any rational species. Humans were deliberately destroying their own fleet to damage the enemy. But the psychological effect on the harvester artificial intelligence was devastating. The machines could not comprehend an enemy that valued victory more than survival. Commander Rick and his Marines had fought their way to the central processing core of the harvester unit. The chamber was filled with quantum computers that controlled the ship's functions. Rick planted explosive charges while his remaining Marines held off waves of enemy drones. "Admiral, this is Commander Davis," Rick said over his radio. "We've reached the core, beginning final phase." Jake's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Commander. All ships, clear the area around Harvester Unit 7. Rick looked at his Marines. Half of them were wounded and all of them were running low on ammunition. They had fought through 20 levels of mechanical hell to reach this point. Now they had to hold their position long enough for the charges to detonate. "Boys and girls," Rick said to his squad, "it's been an honor serving with you. Let's make this count." The explosion that destroyed Harvester Unit 7 could be seen from across the star system. The massive machine simply came apart, its hull splitting along. Stress lines as internal systems overloaded. But more importantly, the destruction sent a signal to every other harvester unit in the area. For the first time in their existence, the mechanical swarm had encountered an enemy they could not understand or predict. The harvesters began to retreat, pulling back from the human fleet to analyze what had happened. Dr. Carol White appeared on every ship's communication screen simultaneously. "All vessels, this is Dr. White. I have been monitoring the harvester communication networks. The enemy artificial intelligence is experiencing what can only be described as confusion. They are requesting additional processing power to analyze. Human tactical methods. Admiral Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Then we've got them exactly where we want them. When a computer stops fighting and starts thinking, it becomes vulnerable. The first battle was over, but Jake knew it was only the beginning. The harvesters would adapt, would learn from this encounter, but they would be adapting to fight an enemy that specialized in being unpredictable, enemy that turned weakness into strength and made chaos into strategy. The human fleet regrouped around the hidden Keplerian ships. They had lost 30% of their vessels, but they had achieved something no other species had ever accomplished. They had made the harvesters afraid. Soft wind through leaves transmitted a message that reached every human ship. Admiral Morrison, we have watched species fight the harvesters for centuries. We have seen civilizations with technology beyond imagination fall before their efficiency. But we have never seen anything like what you have done today. You have given us something we thought was lost forever. What's that? Jake asked. Hope, the alien replied. For the first time since the harvesters arrived, we have hope. Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that the real battle was still ahead. Somewhere in the darkness, the Harvester Command ship was analyzing their defeat, preparing new strategies, calling for reinforcements. Humanity had shown the galaxy something important. Even perfect machines could be beaten by imperfect. Like beings who refused to give up. The Deathworld doctrine was working, and Earth's children were just getting started. The final battle took place in the heart of the Kepler system, where the massive Harvester command ship hung in space like a mechanical moon. The structure was 30 kilometers across, larger than any city on Earth. Its surface was covered with weapon batteries that could destroy planets. It was surrounded by over 200 smaller harvester units forming perfect defensive formations. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, studying the enemy formation through the main view screen. His fleet had been reduced to 6 battleships, 12 destroyers, and a handful of support vessels. Against any logical enemy, the battle would already be lost. But the harvesters were learning that humans were not logical. Dr. White, Jake said. To the ship's artificial intelligence analysis of the command ship, Carol White's image appeared on the communication screen, her electronic features showing what might have been respect. Admiral, the command ship contains the central processing unit that controls the entire harvester swarm. If we can destroy it, the remaining units will lose coordination and shut down. However, the ship is protected by energy shields that could stop a supernova. Commander Rick Davis entered the bridge, his armor still scorched from the previous battle. Half of his Death Squad Marines were dead, but the survivors were ready for one last mission. Admiral, my people have studied the command ship's structure. There's only one way to get through those shields. Jake knew what Rick was about to say, and the knowledge felt like a weight in his chest. Tell me, someone has to fly a ship directly into the shield generator. The impact will create a gap that lasts maybe 30 seconds, long enough for a small team to board the command ship and plant charges in the central processor. Captain, Lisa Grant stepped forward. It's a suicide mission. Whoever flies into those shields won't survive the impact. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of weapons charging. Every person present understood what they were facing. To save the Kepler Coalition, to stop the harvesters from spreading across the galaxy, someone would have to die. Jake looked at his crew, these brave men and women who had followed him across the galaxy to fight an impossible war. They had lost friends, watched their ships burn, and faced horrors that would haunt them forever. While he was asking them to make the ultimate sacrifice. I'll do it, he said quietly. The Vengeance will make the run. No, Commander, Rick said. Immediately, Admiral. You're needed to coordinate the fleet. My Marines and I will take a destroyer and punch through the shields. It's what we trained for. Dr. Carol White interrupted their discussion. There is another option. I could pilot the ship myself. An artificial intelligence does not fear death because I do not truly live. It would be the logical choice. Captain Lisa Grant shook her head. Carol, You're as much a person as any of us. Besides, this mission requires human intuition, not logic. The harvesters will try to predict our approach, and only a human mind can be unpredictable enough to succeed. The debate was settled when Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez spoke up from her communications station. Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the Keplerian survivors. Soft Wind Through Leaves wants to speak with you. The alien's musical voice filled the bridge, but now it carried a strength that had not been there before. Emeril Morrison, we have been listening to your discussion. We cannot allow you to sacrifice yourselves for us. We will find another way. Jake smiled sadly. Soft wind through leaves, there is no other way. This is what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, no matter what the cost. But why? The alien asked, its voice breaking with emotion. Why would you give your lives for strangers? Your species could flee, could return to your homeworld and live in safety. Why do you choose death over survival? Lisa answered for all of them, because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Because if we don't stop the harvesters here, they'll keep spreading, keep killing. Eventually, they'll reach Earth. But more than that, it's because it's right, because you asked for help and we said yes. The final assault began with a human fleet doing exactly what no sane military force would attempt. Instead of concentrating their firepower, they spread out across 1,000 kilometers, attacking the harvester defensive line from every possible angle. It looked like suicide, and by every military calculation, but the scattered attack confused the harvester artificial intelligence. The enemy computers tried to calculate the optimal response to chaos and found that such calculations were impossible. While the machines struggled to understand human tactics, the fleet pressed their attack. Commander Rick led his Marines in the destroyer U.S. Thunder toward the command ship's shield generator. The small vessel was loaded with enough nuclear explosives to crack a moon, and its crew had volunteered for a mission they knew they would not survive. All ships. This is Commander Davis. Rick broadcast as his ship accelerated toward the enemy. It's been an honor serving with you all. Take care of the galaxy for us. The Thunder struck the shield generator at full speed, its nuclear payload, detonating in a blast that lit up the entire star system. For exactly 28 seconds, a gap appeared in the command ship's defenses. Admiral Morrison led the boarding party himself, taking the fastest ship remaining in the fleet through the gap before the shields could regenerate. They landed inside the command ship's docking bay and fought their way through corridors filled with mechanical defenders toward the central processor. The inside of the command ship was a nightmare of moving machinery and electronic surveillance. But Jake and his team had one advantage the harvesters could not account for. They were not fighting for victory or survival. They were fighting for something the machines could never understand. They were fighting for love. The central processor was a chamber the size of a cathedral, filled with quantum computers that controlled every harvester unit in the galaxy. Jake planted the charges while his team held off waves of enemy drones. The artificial intelligence that controlled the swarm spoke to them through speakers in the walls. Humans, the mechanical voice said, your actions are illogical. You sacrifice valuable resources for no gain. You risk extinction to save strangers. Why do you persist in these inefficient behaviors? Jake finished setting the last charge and looked up at the cameras watching him. Because we're human. Because some things are more important than efficiency. Because someone has to care. The explosion that destroyed the command ship could be seen from every world in the Kepler system. The massive structure came apart like a flower blooming in reverse, its destruction sending electromagnetic pulses across space. Throughout the system, harvester units began shutting down as their central coordination disappeared. Admiral Morrison did not survive the explosion. But his sacrifice saved not just the Kepler coalition, but potentially every peaceful species in the galaxy. The harvester threat was ended, their perfect efficiency broken by human chaos and courage. In the aftermath, the surviving human ships regrouped with the Keplerian refugees. The fleet was shattered, reduced to a handful of vessels, but they had achieved the impossible. They had stopped an enemy that had consumed hundreds of civilizations. Soft wind through leaves transmitted a message that reached across the galaxy, carried by communication networks that spanned the stars. The message told the story of a species from a death world that had traveled across space to save strangers, that had sacrificed everything to protect those who could not protect themselves. Within days, Earth received responses from dozens of alien civilizations. Some offered friendship, others alliance, still others simply gratitude. All of them acknowledged that the universe had changed. Humanity had announced itself not as conquerors, but as guardians. Captain Lisa Grant. Now the senior officer of the survivors stood on the bridge of the damaged Vengeance and looked out at the stars. The cost of victory had been terrible, but the galaxy was safe. Peaceful species could continue to build their beautiful civilizations. Knowing that someone would stand guard against the darkness, Earth began building new ships, not for conquest, but for protection. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy as the shield that stood between civilized worlds and the chaos that threatened them. The death world had awakened, and its children would never sleep again. They would stand watch among the stars, ready to answer any call for help, no matter how far away or how dangerous, because that was what humans did. They protected those who could not protect themselves. They stood between the darkness and the light, and they never ever gave up.